Hello, welcome to another episode of Pulling Back the Chemo Curtain. I am here at Memorial Sloan Kettering, possibly getting my 52nd infusion, but it's unclear because my neutrophil count is very, very low. So we're just waiting to see what the doctor will say about that. And I just wanted to check in quickly. I didn't check in last week because I came back late from a trip and I was too tired and I slept through the whole chemo. But now I've got some time and I'd just like to share with you a really emotional weekend that I had in Quebec City with my son and with a Rwandan woman that I met 27 years ago in Kigali at the funeral of her husband who had been brutally assassinated and whose case I was investigating for the for the United Nations Human Rights Field Operation near the end of my 1-year stint in Rwanda, which consisted of investigating genocide to begin with and also investigating current abuses by the regime, the Rwandan Patriotic Army, that took control of the country in the wake of the genocide. So I have been denying, Judith has been inviting me to Quebec to see her and to stay with her, to thank me for a role that I didn't want to accept that I'd done. Basically, her story is that after the assassination, she fled to Kenya and was able to get refugee status like many months later and eventually get resettled to Canada. And, you know, the truth is that even though I'd left the field operation, I followed that entire process and helped to expedite and get things going because there were hundreds of thousands of refugees in Kenya. It was very difficult and a lengthy process to actually get papers saying that you were a refugee that would be required in order to resettle in a third country. So the beautiful news of this story is that Judith eventually was resettled in Canada with her 3 beautiful children that I had met, both in Rwanda and then briefly in Kenya. And we were able to sit with those children and, you know, their small children and talk. I was able to talk about their father, you know, with the details from my investigation in a way that was really meaningful for them because, of course, they have their mother's story about their father, but I was able to add some of the details of the investigation and the meetings that I had at the gendarmerie and the follow-up and just attest to what an amazing individual their father was. Just full of integrity, modest, kind. Yeah, like amazing individual. And that was just really meaningful. And the lesson is how to accept a compliment, right? I mean, Judith is very extreme. She credits me with saving her life, and that's what I just have pushed back against for decades, saying no, she herself was determined and dedicated and did everything, and there were just a few people around that helped to expedite things or put them in the inbox of, you know, an embassy or a United Nations agency. So that was super beautiful. And it was also a really hard visit in the sense that I devoted a long time in my life early on in my career to the country of Rwanda through this human rights field operation, doing genocide investigation, and then doing investigation into the current abuses by the regime that had taken power in the wake of the genocide, which were very politically sensitive cases. When we were there, I got death threats. When I left Rwanda, I even wrote a book about a massacre that had taken place a year after the genocide in southern Rwanda, where there were internally displaced persons camps, which was kind of covered up by the international community because it was very embarrassing and because, you know, no one could imagine criticizing a government that had been through a genocide. But now it's been almost 3 decades. There's so much information on what's going on, what has been going on in Rwanda and outside of Rwanda by transnational repression by the Rwandan regime. So I'm not going to go into too many details. my book is called The Protection Gap in the International Protection of Displaced Persons. The Case of Rwanda. I don't even know if it's available anymore. There's a book by Michaela Wrong called Do Not Disturb. It talks about political assassinations done in foreign countries by the Rwandan regime. There's, any number of resources online about the role of Rwanda in the war in Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is a war that has taken the lives of 6 million people since 1998. And there's just so much information about the repression in Rwanda of opposition, of journalists, of non-governmental, or every sort of difference of opinion. And there's this contrast between the sort of work that the Rwandan regime has done and deserves credit for in terms of infrastructure, public works, etc., but at the same time while maintaining a really autocratic regime that is ruled by a minority in the country. I'm not going to go on more, but it's disheartening when I've spent so much blood, sweat, and tears in that country. I worked in the prisons as well, where there was like 10,000 people in the space for like half that much. I mean, I went to Rwanda and my heart was stolen by this amazing country and the amazing people there, and just the extent of suffering and the generosity in light of that suffering. When I left, the prisoners held a party for me in Kigali Central Prison where they had literally saved up their high protein biscuits that they'd gotten through, aid. They created these beautiful drawings for me. I have a letter from the director of the prison. Like, the generosity and the love and the acceptance that I felt was absolutely incredible. And ironically, after learning to speak Chinese and working in China and on China for so long, I never felt that degree of acceptance. You're always a foreigner in China. Whereas Rwanda, I was called sister. And so, sorry, just a few lengthy ruminations. And, where in your life are you deflecting, like, a compliment or someone who wants to thank you for something? Like, what's wrong with stepping into that a little bit? Recognizing that it wasn't necessarily all you're doing, but that a part of it, it's okay to step into that. I will be posting pictures of that visit at some point when I get time, and in the meanwhile, sending you all so much love.